It's finally Friday.
It's Friday, Friday.
Thank God it's
Welcome back to the Friday Show, presented this week by Cal Racing Cares. I'm Scott Jagow, along with Ray Paulick. We're glad you could join us. Tomorrow, Ray, obviously the $16 million Pegasus World Cup, a lot of energy around that this week. But we also had a story earlier in the week about some proposed changes to the Breeders' Cup. So let's talk about that since we're covering the Pegasus World Cup in our News Minute. One of the proposals was to have a Breeders' Cup Derby and then break out the Breeders' Cup Classic to a separate date a month later. The reaction in our comment section was not positive to this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, in fact, I'm not sure anybody really liked it. And before I give you my thoughts, let me just say first, I think it's great that there are people on the Breeders' Cup board that are trying to continuously make the event better. You can't have complacency in any organization, and I think it's great that they're looking at all kinds of different things. We reported on this Breeders' Cup Derby as a possibility. The Daily Racing Form then reported on the possibility of moving the entire event to December. Adding the Derby and moving the Classic seemed like pretty far-fetched, but moving the entire event to December is even more so. I don't like the Derby concept because, to me, 3-year-olds should race against older horses once they get past summer. That's the way it's always been, and I think you got to have some traditions in racing, and one of them is that 3-year-olds race against their own class. They get to the Traverse, and then they go and they try against older horses.
Yeah, I'm trying to make a case. I'm trying to find a devil's advocate position here to support the idea, because I do like the concept of having a Breeders' Cup Derby. Having the word Derby in there because it's so well known from the Kentucky Derby, and maybe you could bring in a few more fans to watch if they knew that there was a Derby. I don't know if that's the case. I'm just trying to think of something positive about this that might work. So you have the 3-year-olds competing against each other, and then I guess they could also compete in the Breeders' Cup Classic a month later. But I mean, are you going to lose I think you're going to lose your momentum around this. And the Breeders' Cup Derby, is that going to be the culminating event of Breeders' Cup weekend? That doesn't excite me that much. So I guess the more logical, plausible thing would be to move the entire Breeders' Cup to mid-December. And the idea there is to get out of the shadow of college football, right? So I guess that's maybe what we should talk about.
Yeah, finding a window on television is tough in the fall, and that's why the Breeders' Cup, when it expanded to 2 days in 2007, instead of being a Saturday-Sunday event, became a Friday-Saturday event because they didn't want to go up against the NFL. As it is now, they go up against college football, and moving it to December, there's a couple of weekends in December when there is nothing on a Saturday, so you could have a relatively competition-free television landscape on Saturday. But you'd still have to go Friday, Saturday, because the NFL on Sunday, it gets even more important. And once you get deep into December, you have the NFL on Saturday, so forget about that.
Yeah.
So it's racing is a niche sport, and I guess it's a matter of trying to find its niche on the sports calendar, on the TV calendar.
I wouldn't mind if they considered going back to 1 day, honestly, and just make it an awesome Super Saturday with all Breeders' Cup races. And it would have a lot of energy around it. As it is, there's only a handful of 4 races on Friday that are Breeders' Cup races, so that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I understand why they do it is because of ticket sales, but again, any type of change that occurs, there's going to be repercussions. You have to maybe figure out a way to boost the revenue in other ways. The betting handle, for example. So, I mean, I think there are ways to do this where you can make some changes that might be positive, because you don't want to get stagnant. That's one thing you don't want to happen. I think the biggest problem with moving it to December is the weather. So where are you going to hold it? California or Florida? That's pretty much it, right? I mean, Kentucky would be kind of out of the question. It's already cold in November. Certainly in December, it would not be pleasant.
Well, and if you hold it in Florida, at least as things are now, I'm not sure how big of a crowd Gulfstream Park can hold. Yeah, we know they have big events. We were at one in December for the Clásico del Caribe when the place was packed, and it'll be packed for the Pegasus, and it's always packed for Florida Derby Day. But I'm not sure how, Breeders' Cup has traditionally, what did Del Mar limit it to? 40,000, I think, tickets sold. So you can't get 40,000 people at Gulfstream Park. It would become even, more, I guess, of an elite event if you moved it to Gulfstream. So really, you're left with Santa Anita or Del Mar. Not that those are terrible options, but I think you have to give Kentucky a chance to hold the Breeders' Cup. And moving it to December, I don't want to go to Churchill or Keeneland in December. That'd be way too cold, I think.
Yeah, but to your point about Kentucky, I mean, that's where the Breeders' Cup was born. It's about the breeders. So I think, having it at Keeneland was an awesome experience. And I don't think we want to limit. And then, of course, you have New York, which hasn't held it in a long time. So, you're kind of limiting it to just Southern California, which it isn't a lot of fun for everybody else. And also you got the Europeans who have to travel farther. So I guess what I would come back to is, what do we do? And I think the one solution is to just make it a Super Saturday and keep it at the date that it is now.
Yeah, if you move it to December, you talk about ripple effects. I don't think you'll get nearly as many Europeans. I know the people in Hong Kong that put on a big event in December would not be happy. The status quo isn't such a bad thing. They are growing. Handle was up this past year at Del Mar. It's just not growing as fast as, say, the Kentucky Derby. And I don't know if you can really compare the Breeders' Cup to the Derby. The Derby is an institution for a long time. It doesn't have the television or the wagering competition that there is in the fall. I think the World Championships is a great concept, but it's never going to be as big as the Kentucky Derby, period.
Yeah, and I think maybe one lesson in all of this is it's great to be thinking out of the box. I really appreciate the creativity. And but I think we also have to be realistic about what our sport is. It's a niche sport, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think we have to have an inferiority complex to the NFL, because no one can compete with the NFL. And we're not going to get people carrying over from the Triple Crown all the way through the season. It's just, maybe a few fans here or there, but you're not going to get a massive mainstream audience to support racing throughout the year. It's just not going to happen no matter what you do, no matter where you move the Breeders' Cup. I think we just have to be happy with what we can do, and if there are some tweaks we can make to make it better, that's great. But wholesale change, I'm not sure is going to be a positive decision. Let us know your thoughts on some of the options here for making some changes with the Breeders' Cup. You'll find the poll on our homepage at paulickreport.com. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Friday Show, presented by Cal Racing Cares. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.